Man, you come right out of a comic book.
Pulp to Pixel Media.
Exploring the media multiverse of geek culture.
You meddled in things potentially.
Thanks for coming back to the Pulp to Pixel Media. Today we have another episode of Dial G for Gamer. I'm going to be looking at Beyond the Supernatural, the Palladium game, as part of a campaign building exercise. So today I'm going to do a little brainstorming with the system to see if I can build, give a little love to this system that is one of my favorites from very young. I got into the Palladium system as far back as the Robotech licensed game and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the late 80s, early 90s, and I've loved this system since. For all its flaws, it is notorious for having some heavy crunch when it's not necessary and a authorial voice that is not the best GM instructions. So we'll talk a little about house ruling and kind of like working with the older material to get it to work. But this was inspired, this video is inspired, and so credit where credit should be due, by the work of Mega Dumbcast, one of my favorite podcasts out there. Chris Newton over there has been doing pretty amazing pop culture work where he goes through a different Palladium core rule book, one page at a time, one page a day, and talks about what's the dumbest thing on there, as a sort of critique of game design and also a kind of love letter to a system that's kind of got a love-hate relationship to it. So I love that series a lot. I definitely recommend it. That's if you want to try that, you can find those at Mega Dumbcast. So that is a place for you to go there. So I'll have that somewhere on the screen. Now, he's currently covering Beyond the Supernatural on there. So if you do catch current episodes of that, he's covered Ninjas and Super Spies, Heroes Unlimited, both games I own, both of the games I love, and he's currently covering Beyond the Supernatural. Now, usually whenever he covers some of these, I always kind of, for fun, make characters in those systems, just to see how, in sort of like defense of what can you do with the system if you sort of open it up. And so this time I'm going to do the same thing. And one of the things I like to do often is to model different systems. So model different characters and games into different systems. So in this case, I'm going to go with Scooby-Doo. So here is the premise for today's, what I'm calling the Supernatural Summer and Other Strangeness. Scooby-Doo meets Palladium Megaverse campaign. Basically, it's what if the Mystery Inc. gang or characters in the Beyond the Supernatural side of the Palladium Megaverse. This has them solving crimes and facing real supernatural threats. So, because of that, that's going to primarily work with the Beyond the Supernatural game, but I'm also going to be using the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness game for obvious reasons we'll see in a second, and Ninjas and Super Spies for less obvious reasons, but ones that I will make clear. So, let's talk about a little bit of brainstorm, how to use this old game system. Now, I am using the first edition of this game. It's the one I own. I do not own the second edition of the game. I do have it on PDF, but I haven't had a chance to fully read it. And I like playing with these early editions. I think in fixing some of the things in the later editions, they actually made more problems. And that these earlier editions actually have, since they're a little unfinished or open-ended, they're open-ended. So you have a lot more play if you just pay attention to the really basic rules. So I'm sticking to this one. So let's take a look at some of the character ideas that comes with this. So here's where I kind of came up with characters. So what kind of characters are we going to have? And this is where we have the TMNT coming back in. Starting with Scooby. You'll see here I have as a mutant animal. Now, I wanted to play this within that world, and he's a cartoon dog that can talk, or sort of talk. So the closest thing in the Megaverse would be mutant animal, and I've come up with a way to figure out how that has happened. So we'll talk a little about that. Shaggy, I wanted the characters all to be psionic characters or psychic characters. Not necessarily the parapsychologist character that's built into the Beyond the Supernatural game. Mainly because I also wanted them all to be high school students. So I wanted this to play with them as it's a group of high school students in a van with a talking dog traveling around fighting crime and supernatural threats as a mix. And how would that play mechanically? So a couple of things I came up with was Shaggy's a latent psychic. Now, one of the things that's kind of a design flaw. No, sorry, I don't want to say a design flaw, but it's the way it's treated in the game as a metafiction is a bit of a flaw. Is the mechanical parts of the psionic system, the ISP, the PPE, the psychic potential energy PPE, ISP inner strength points, and then with a few other things with the ninjas and super spies, there's also chi and bio-e, all of these sort of energy systems. The problem is that because it's so mechanized, there's a tendency to approach these powers in game terms as being mechanized as well, but that's not really the way they should play. So one of the things I like to do, especially with psychic abilities, is have it be that the player plays it mechanically, but the character experiences it differently as something else. So Shaggy, as a latent psychic, has certain psychic abilities, but he doesn't know he has psychic abilities. He's not like taken an ESP test or something like that. It's with the, that scene from Ghostbusters with the squiggly lines and the triangle and the square and the circle and the electric shocks. No, he hasn't done anything like that. So these are all like weird intuitions or things that people have. So you can play it up a lot like that. So I went with latent psychic. Freddy is their trap builder. So I decided to make him a psi mechanic. This way he can start then build things that they could potentially use against supernatural threats down the line, so that they have some sort of mechanical oomph to fight with, and it's going to play a little with the mystery machine as well. Daphne was physical psychic. I also thought like either ordinary person or natural genius, as well as Velma, who I'm picking natural genius. But I think I'm going to go with physical psychic, because there's a number of physical psychic abilities that would play really well, but wouldn't necessarily look like the person had a psychic ability. It would just look like they're really well trained or something like that. So, or they just have a quirky mindset. So, I thought we would go with that for her. And then finally, we have the other elements and the base elements of the system, and then that would be the Mystery Inc. itself, the crime-busting organization. And this is where ninjas and super spies will come in, because it has the rules for building organizations and agencies. And then the Mystery Machine, which is also part of Ninjas and Super Spies, because that's where we can build a specialty vehicle. And in addition to the specialty vehicle, we can also get to a crime-busting agency as well. A psi mechanics as well. So this is where Freddy can synergize with the Mystery Machine as part of your game design. And so this is just from what I've seen on the face. Now, let's take a look at the Mystery Inc. and we'll go from there. So kind of broke down how they do this. And so again, this one in particular here is a breakdown of all the different things that we can do with the Mystery Inc. setup. So I find, and now this is found here with the Ninjas and Super Spies book. As you can see, this is my 100 beaten copy. So what do we got going here? All right, so for this one, we have the different levels and their point systems. Now, this comes out to be about 101 points when I built it up. And it's a crime-busting agency, which roughly around a crime-busting agency is something like 9 to 100 build points. So 1 point over. So that's perfectly fine. Now, a couple of things. One of the things I find is really good about this game is that there's a lot of suggestive ideas, but then when they try to over-mechanize them, that's where the problem runs in. But if you spend a little less time with the mechanization, more just go with the suggestive ideas, you actually have a really good toolkit to work with. So one of the first things they do is outfits, and that's a 0. So anytime it's 0, it's basically it's none. Whatever the characters bring with it is what they bring as resources. In this case, we have outfits, which is, and I picked utility outfits. Now, this is a bit of a joke, actually. I spent those points on the joke because this represents the idea that the Mystery Inc. gang always wears the same clothes. So I made utility outfits as in if they wear uniforms. Now, that's mostly just a joke, but it was kind of one of the ways I helped brainstorm how to use the game mechanics to kind of build the cartoon-like mechanics of the Scooby-Doo world. Equipment, 2 points, cheap gear. I think that was something like $500 mission. And and this is going to be special because this is basically going to be their main budget. Weapons, none. They're a bunch of teenagers. Vehicles, spy car. So I spent 20 points here. Spent a lot here. Spy car. The Mystery Machine is a specialized vehicle, so I'm going to build them using the Ninjas and Super Spies rules. Communications, basic service, so they can use the post office, they can use phone service, things like that. Office and distribution, none. And this is kind of a little special. They have no central office. It's the Mystery Machine itself. So this is why I spent so much here. This in D vehicles, normally you can get a fleet of spy vehicles. So you can get a different spy vehicle for a mission. That's kind of like the James Bond thing. But I put a little asterisk because this is a one-time for us. So by spending this, but not also having office and distribution, in essence, we're saying the spy car they build is the car itself. Now, this is something like a lot, almost like $200,000 in budget with that level. So there's a fair amount of budget to work with to build this specialized vehicle. We've got military power, none. Again, they're high schoolers. Sponsorship, 50. Agent sponsored. So with this, we're going with, these are special as well. The $500 for cheap gear is basically the weekly allowance they get. And so when I went agent sponsored, it's basically what I meant is that budget there is what they get. Now the vehicle budget is a one-time budget, so that'll be when I build the Mystery Machine later. But the cheap gear budget, that's their weekly budget. Part of this idea I have for the campaign coming back as I started to develop this was that this could represent, each adventure they go on could represent like the mystery of the week that they go through. And it's a summer event, so there's going to be 8 mysteries. So you could even run this as an 8 mystery campaign where the way I conceived the characters, and I thought of it, this was that, so what if this was, it's 1969, so we could even make it period appropriate if we want, or you can bring it forward in time with a few tweaks here and there, which we'll talk about later when we do the characters. So what we're looking at here is that that they're getting an allowance from Daphne's parents, and it's part of some of the canonical backstories for them. It's either in later ones, Shaggy's uncle is rich, and therefore that's where they get money, or it's Daphne's family is rich and they fund them. So this is this idea that they get this allowance per week that they can spend on room, board, and mysteries, and any sort of devices or gadgets they need to build for that adventure. It's not a lot to work with, but it also gives them some fun to do with. Okay, so let's take a look at the rest of what they've got. So, budget none, again. Administration control, loose laws. So administrative control is like how much that agency can get away with things, and agents from that agency can get away with things. I give it loose laws because I wanted there to be the built-in, this idea that these kids are being allowed to investigate crimes without themselves going to jail at the end of it. So it's just to sort of narratively represent them not having to deal with the trials or things after they solve a crime that we don't see off stage. Internal security, none. There's locks on the mystery machine. External infiltration, info source. Now, okay, so I spent some points here, and it's like normally in the Ninjas and Super Spies, this is usually this is the kind of double agent you can expect to have or something in an event. What I thought was this could represent a special guest star, as a la the Scooby-Doo movies, where they'd have the famous celebrity stars, or some special character per NPC to help out throughout. So this could be an information source, someone who's has the skinny of the cast of characters they'll get during each adventure. So I thought this would be a good mechanic to bring in as part of that, and kind of help guide. I really do feel that anytime in the Palladium games, if there's an organizational chart thing, use that to help design your world, because the organizations and how they interact with the world really do give a flavor to what your player characters can do and set the context. Finally, agency credentials, known. So I kind of want to have this idea that they're famous for solving crimes and stuff. And finally, agency salaries, freelance. So I gave freelance here, so they get reward money, and so that's part of it. Since the Palladium system game itself has this kind of D&D still OSR, you gotta buy things and you gotta get money as rewards. I thought the reward system, because they often deal with crimes with recovering stolen objects and things like that in the stories. All right, now, where to go from there? So this video I'm hoping to make as part of a multi-part video. So we are going to come back later where I'm going to do a little more time to go a little more in depth into the character creation, and then talk about a little bit of what ideas you could have for campaign design itself. How would you design an adventure with a Scooby-Doo-like feel in the Beyond the Supernatural setting, in the Ninjas and Super Spies, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles world? So come back next week for that video, and I'll be posting where I'll start going through the specific character creations for each of the characters. Thanks for watching, though. Do make sure to like, subscribe, and smash that notification bell when you get a chance. And remember, you know, this is labor of love, so give us a share whenever you can. So once again, this was Dial D for Gamer, and we are doing another. And come back next time, and we'll talk about character builds.